leadership mirror. How great leaders build themselves before they build anything. What if the biggest limit on your leadership is not your team, your budget, your market, or your workload? What if the biggest limit is the version of you that shows up under pressure? Because that is where leadership really gets tested. Not when things are calm, not when the plan is working, not when people are nodding their heads and deadlines are being met. Leadership gets tested when expectations collide. When people disappoint you you have to make a decision with incomplete information. And when your own fear starts dressing itself up as certainty. A lot of people want the visibility of leadership. They want the title, the influence, the ability to shape direction. But fewer people are prepared for the mirror that leadership holds up. Leadership will reveal your patience. It will reveal your ego. It will reveal how you handle uncertainty. It will reveal whether you need to be right more than you need to be effective. And it will reveal whether people feel stronger after being led by you or smaller. So today, I want to talk about a deeper kind of leadership. Not just tactics, not just productivity hacks, not just how to run a cleaner meeting or give better feedback, even though those things matter. I want to talk about the kind of leadership that begins on the inside and then shows up everywhere else. Because great leaders do not just build teams. They build trust. They build steadiness. They build clarity. They build courage in other people. And before they can do that consistently, they have to build those things in themselves. In this episode, we are going to walk through 5 leadership shifts that change everything. How to lead yourself before leading others. How to create clarity when people feel overwhelmed. How to build trust without trying to control everything. How to make hard decisions without becoming cold. And how to grow people in a way that multiplies leadership around you. If you are leading a company, a team, a project, a classroom, a family, simply are trying to lead your own life with more intention, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. There is a version of leadership that is mostly performative. It sounds polished. It looks confident. It uses the right phrases. It knows how to speak in strategy decks and all hands meetings and performance reviews. It knows how to say, we need alignment and let's be proactive and we need accountability. But underneath all of that, sometimes there is very little substance because real leadership is not proven by vocabulary. It is proven by effect. After people interact with you, are they clearer or more confused? Are they more grounded or more anxious? Do they know what matters or are they just reacting to your mood? Do they feel trusted or do they feel managed? Do they feel challenged in a way that helps them grow or criticized in a way that makes them shrink? That is the real scoreboard. And the reason this matters so much is that leadership is contagious. Your emotional patterns spread. Your clarity spreads. Your indecision spreads. Your courage spreads. Your defensiveness spreads. Your consistency spreads. People listen to what you say, yes, but they absorb how you are. That means leadership is not just a skill set. It is a transfer. You are constantly transferring something to the people around you. Some leaders transfer panic. Some transfer politics. Some transfer confusion. Some transfer urgency without meaning. And some transfer steadiness, focus, honesty, and belief. So the promise of this episode is simple. By the end of our time together, I want you to have a practical leadership framework that helps you become the kind of person others can trust in hard moments. Not a perfect leader, not a charismatic leader, not a leader who always has the answer, a trustworthy leader, a clear leader, a grounded leader, a leader who helps people do their best work without losing themselves in the process. Let's start at the foundation. Lead yourself. The first leadership shift is this. You cannot lead others beyond your ability to lead yourself. That does not mean you need to have every part of your life perfectly together before you can lead. If that were the standard, nobody would qualify. It means this instead. If you cannot manage your own reactions, you will eventually dump them on other people. If you cannot tell the difference between stress and truth, you will make stress-based decisions and call them strategy. If you do not know your insecurities, they will show up as control. If you do not know your ego, it will show up as defensiveness. If you do not know your fear, it will show up as delay, overanalysis, or the need for constant approval. Self-leadership is not soft. It is operationally important. Think about the leader who walks into a room already frustrated, already carrying tension from the last meeting, already irritated by something unrelated. They do not say, I am dysregulated right now. They just start asking sharper questions, interrupting people, dismissing ideas, or changing direction too quickly. And now the whole team is adapting to something that has nothing to do with the work. That happens every day in organizations. A leader has a bad morning and 5 people lose their confidence. A leader feels threatened and a high performer stops speaking up. A leader avoids discomfort and a necessary decision gets delayed for 3 weeks. A leader needs to look certain and the team inherits a bad plan nobody is allowed to question. This is why self-awareness is not a luxury in leadership. It is part of the job. A question I think every leader should ask regularly is, what version of me shows up when I feel pressure? Do you become controlling? Do you become vague? Do you become overly optimistic? Do you withdraw? Do you start solving everything yourself because it feels faster than coaching someone through it? Do you become impatient with learning curves? Do you confuse speed with leadership? Those patterns matter. And here is the tricky part. Your strengths under control can become your liabilities under pressure. A decisive leader can become dismissive. A caring leader can become avoidant. A visionary leader can become ungrounded. A highly responsible leader can become a bottleneck. A standards-driven leader can become impossible to please. The goal is not to get rid of your strength. The goal is to know what happens when they get distorted. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine a team misses an important deadline. Maybe it affects a client. Maybe it affects revenue. Maybe it creates embarrassment at the executive level. A leader who has not done the inner work might react in one of 3 unhelpful ways. First, they blame. They want a name. They want a culprit. They want emotional relief more than understanding. Second, they overfunction. They jump in, take over, start rewriting the work, calling people directly, bypassing normal channels, and communicating that nobody can really be trusted.
Third, they avoid.
They delay the hard conversation because they do not want conflict, and now the team learns that standards are flexible and problems can be buried. All 3 responses feel different, but they come from the same place. A leader who cannot stay grounded long enough to respond instead of react. A grounded leader does something else. They pause. They gather facts. They separate failure from identity. They ask what broke in the process, what signals were missed, and what ownership needs to look like going forward. They stay honest without becoming theatrical. That is self-leadership in action. So how do you build it? You start by paying attention to your internal patterns before they become external consequences. You notice when your body tightens in certain conversations. You notice the kinds of people who trigger impatience in you. You notice where you over-explain because you want approval. You notice when you become overly forceful because uncertainty makes you uncomfortable. And then you build practices that create space between stimulus and response. That might be a 5-minute reset before a difficult meeting. It might be writing down the outcome you want before giving feedback. It might be asking one trusted colleague, what happens to me when I'm stressed that I may not see clearly? It might be deciding that in moments of frustration, you will ask 2 questions before giving one opinion. Small practices, big impact. The best leaders I know are not people who never feel anger, fear, frustration, or doubt. They feel all of it, but they do not let every feeling take the wheel. That is maturity. That is discipline. And that is the first layer of leadership. Before you ask whether people are following you, ask whether you are governing yourself. Because if you are not leading yourself, you are asking other people to absorb what you have not yet learned to carry. Once a leader begins to govern themselves well, the next gift they can give a team is clarity. And in a world full of noise, clarity is one of the most generous forms of leadership. Clarity is one of the biggest misconceptions about leadership, is that people mainly need motivation. Sometimes they do, but more often, what they need is clarity. People can handle a lot hard. Work, change, high standards, tight timelines, even bad news. What wears them down is ambiguity. Not knowing what matters most. Not knowing who owns what. Not knowing what success actually looks like. Not knowing whether priorities changed again. Not knowing whether they are doing well. Not knowing whether the leader means what they say. Confusion is exhausting. And one of the quiet failures in leadership is this. Leaders often think they have communicated because they have spoken. Those are not the same thing. Saying something once is not clarity. Putting it in a slide is not clarity. Mentioning it in a meeting is not clarity. Clarity is when other people can repeat it, act on it, and make good decisions because of it. That is a higher bar. A clear leader answers the questions people are often too polite to ask. What are we actually trying to do? Why does it matter? What matters most right now? What can wait? What does good look like? What decision has been made? What is still open? Who owns this? How will we know if we are off track? A lot of team stress disappears when those questions are answered well. Let's make this concrete. Imagine a leader says, "We need to move faster." That sounds reasonable, but it is not clear. Faster than what? On which projects? By cutting which steps? Without reducing quality in which areas? Who gets to make trade-offs? What gets deprioritized so speed is possible? Without clarity, move faster becomes a pressure statement, not an operating instruction. Or imagine a leader says, "I want more ownership from the team." Again, sounds good. But what does that mean? Do you want people to bring solutions instead of just problems? Do you want them to make decisions without waiting for approval? Do you want them to follow through more consistently? Do you want cross-functional initiative? Do you want better communication upward? Ownership is a beautiful word until nobody defines it. Clear leaders define terms. They reduce interpretive chaos. They know that vague language creates hidden friction. And clarity is not just about tasks. It is also about emotional tone. In a moment of change, people are asking, are we safe? Is this direction stable? Can I trust what I'm hearing? Is leadership hiding something? Am I allowed to ask honest questions? A clear leader does not create false certainty. They do not pretend to know what they do not know. Instead, they say things like, "Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know yet. Here's what has been decided. Here's what we're still evaluating. Here's when you can expect the next update." That kind of communication calms people because it is honest and structured. Clarity builds trust because it reduces the gap between reality and communication. It also helps teams move faster without unnecessary drama. Here is something leaders forget lack of clarity creates extra labor somewhere else. If priorities are unclear, teams waste time guessing. If roles are unclear, work gets duplicated or dropped. If expectations are unclear, performance conversations get harder. If decisions are unclear, people keep revisiting settled issues. If values are unclear, culture gets defined by whoever is loudest. Clarity is not extra work. It prevents extra work. Now, to be fair, clarity takes effort. It takes thinking before talking. It takes deciding before announcing. It takes repetition without irritation. It takes the humility to realize that if 10 people are confused, the problem may not be their listening. It may be your communication. And yes, some people will still misunderstand. Some people will still need reinforcement. Some situations are genuinely complex, but strong leaders do not hide behind complexity when simplicity is possible. They translate, they sharpen, they repeat, they prioritize. One useful leadership habit is this. At the end of any important meeting, ask, before we leave, what are the top 3 takeaways and who owns what? Simple, powerful. Another good habit, when you communicate a priority, also state what is not the priority. That helps people make trade-offs. It gives them permission to focus. And one more. If you are leading through change, communicate before people feel fully comfortable, but after you have enough substance to be useful. Too early and you create noise. Too late and people create stories in the silence. Clarity is timing plus truth plus repetition. If you want to be a leader people trust, learn to say things plainly. Learn to define what matters. Learn to make direction easy to carry. People should not have to decode you in order to follow you. Transition now. Once you have self-leadership and clarity, the next question becomes what kind of environment are you creating around you? Because leadership is not only about direction, it is also about safety, trust, and the emotional architecture of the team. Segment 3. Trust is built through consistency, not control. A lot of leaders say they want a high trust culture, but what they really want is high compliance with low friction. That is different. Trust cannot be demanded. It cannot be announced into existence, and it definitely cannot be built through surveillance, second guessing, and constant correction. Trust is built when people repeatedly experience you as steady, fair, truthful, and aligned. It grows through patterns. Do you respond predictably under pressure? Do you keep your word? Do you give credit generously? Do you handle mistakes proportionally? Do you address issues directly instead of gossiping sideways? Do you stay the same person in private that you are in public? That is where trust comes from. And let's be honest, trust gets hard when the stakes are high, when a project matters, when a client is upset, when a number is down, when leadership above you is applying pressure. It becomes very tempting to tighten your grip, to check everything, approve everything, correct everything, be in every meeting. Read every message. Rewrite every document. Hover over every decision. And in the short term, that can feel responsible. But over time, control weakens the very people you need to become strong. If your team cannot think without you, that is not a mark of your importance. It is a sign that something in the system has become too dependent on you. Great leaders do not create organizational dependence. They create distributed strength. Now, this does not mean be hands-off and hope for the best. Trust is not the absence of standards. Trust is not passive leadership. Trust is not refusing to inspect work because you want to seem empowering. Real trust has structure. It says, I will be clear about outcomes. I will give context. I will set standards. I will check in appropriately. And I will leave room for you to think, learn, and own. That is different from abandonment. One of the most important leadership questions is, am I supporting this person or am I relieving them of responsibility? Those are not the same thing. Sometimes a leader steps in because they care, but the effect is that the team learns when things get hard enough, the leader will take it back. And once people learn that, ownership goes down fast. Why take full ownership if the leader is going to override the final decision? Why develop judgment if every call gets second-guessed? Why be proactive if it is safer to wait? Control can create short-term neatness and long-term weakness. Trust, on the other hand, looks messier at first. People learn. They make some mistakes. They need coaching. You have to tolerate some imperfection while capability grows. But that is how teams become durable. Let me share a familiar workplace moment. A manager delegates an important presentation to a capable team member. The team member works hard, brings a draft, and it is good but not exactly how the manager would have done it. Now the manager has a choice. Option 1, rewrite the whole thing at night, present their polished version, and quietly reinforce that it's just faster if I do it myself. Option 2, coach the draft, explain what needs to improve, preserve the person's ownership, and help them level up. Option 1 feels efficient. Option 2 creates leaders. And this is the hidden tax of low trust leadership. You keep winning the task and losing the team. You keep getting the output done, but you are not building capacity around you. You remain tired. People remain tentative, and the organization remains fragile. Trust also depends on fairness. People do not need perfection from leaders, but they do watch for consistency. Do you hold your favorites to the same standard as everyone else? Do you listen differently, depending on rank? Do you react strongly to one person's mistake and gently to another person's identical mistake? Do you ask for candor but punish people emotionally when they give it? Teams are always studying the unwritten rules. That means your behavior teaches culture more than your values statement does. If you want a team where people speak up, show that disagreement is survivable. If you want accountability, make feedback direct and normal instead of dramatic. If you want initiative, stop punishing imperfect first attempts. If you want trust, tell the truth early, especially when it is uncomfortable. And here is something especially important. Trust is not built in the big speech, it is built in the small moment. The meeting after the mistake, the response to bad news, the credit you give when someone else shines, the tone you use when someone asks a basic question, the consistency between what you say you value and what you reward. That is the real work. Trust grows when people can predict your character, not your mood, your character. Asterisk, asterisk, transition. Asterisk, asterisk, so far, we have talked about self-leadership, clarity, and trust. But every leader eventually arrives at a harder edge of the job decision making, because no matter how thoughtful you are, leadership will ask you to make choices that disappoint someone. Asterisk, segment 4. Hard decisions without losing your humanity. Asterisk, asterisk, there is a false choice that traps a lot of leaders. They think they have to choose between being decisive and being compassionate, between having standards and being kind, between making hard calls and being human. That is not true. The strongest leaders learn how to make difficult decisions without becoming cold, and how to stay humane without becoming vague. That balance matters, because when leaders avoid hard decisions in the name of kindness, the cost usually gets pushed onto the team. A low performer stays too long, and everyone else carries the weight. A toxic behavior goes unaddressed, and good people start disengaging. A failing initiative stays alive because nobody wants to admit it is failing. A strategy that no longer works gets defended because too much ego is attached to it. A clear no gets turned into a long maybe because the leader wants to avoid discomfort. Avoidance is not kindness. it is delayed damage. At the same time, there are leaders who take pride in being blunt, hard, and unsentimental. They call it high standards. Sometimes it is just emotional laziness. It is easier to be sharp than it is to be clear and respectful. It is easier to shut people down than it is to coach them. It is easier to make people fear you than to earn their respect. Real leadership asks more of you than either softness or severity. It asks for courage with humanity. So what does that look like? It looks like telling the truth without humiliation. It looks like making the decision when the evidence is sufficient, not waiting until every possible doubt disappears. It looks like understanding that people can survive disappointment better than they can survive prolonged confusion. It looks like being firm on standards and thoughtful about dignity. Let's say you need to give hard feedback. A weak leader either dodges it or unloads it. A strong leader prepares for it. They think, what is the actual issue? What examples make it concrete? What is the impact? What expectation needs to change? How can I say this in a way that is clear, honest, and respectful? Then they have the conversation. Not 6 months too late, not in a way that attacks identity, not mixed with so much cushioning that the point disappears. Just clear truth in service of growth. Or let's say you need to make an unpopular strategic decision. Maybe you are cutting a project. Maybe you are reorganizing responsibilities. Maybe you are choosing one direction and not another. Maybe there is no way forward that makes everyone happy. A mature leader does not hide from the emotional reality of that. They understand people may feel disappointed, frustrated, or worried. But they also understand that their job is not to preserve universal comfort. Their job is to serve the mission, protect the health of the team, and make the best decision they can with the information available. That means listening well, thinking rigorously, being transparent about reasoning where appropriate, and then deciding. One thing I have noticed is that some leaders want the emotional benefits of decisiveness without paying the relational cost. They want to make the call, move on, and never deal with the fallout. But leadership is not just making decisions. It is helping people metabolize them. You may need to repeat the why. You may need to hold space for reaction. You may need to answer concerns without reopening every decision endlessly. You may need to stay present after the announcement, not disappear once the message has been delivered. That is part of leadership too. Here is a sentence worth remembering. People can respect a hard decision they dislike if they believe it was made with integrity. Integrity does not mean everyone agrees. It means the process was serious, the reasoning was sound, the communication was honest, and the people affected were treated with dignity. That matters deeply. And by the way, hard decisions are not only external. Sometimes the hardest leadership decision is changing your own mind, admitting a plan is not working, acknowledging that you hired the wrong person, recognizing that your style is causing harm, seeing that the thing which made you successful in one season is now limiting you in another. That kind of decision requires humility. Leadership without humility becomes brittle. You spend more energy defending your image than improving your judgment. So if you're facing a hard decision right now, here are a few grounding questions. What problem am I actually solving? What am I avoiding because it is uncomfortable? What evidence matters most here? Who will carry the cost if I delay? How do I make this decision in a way that preserves dignity, even if it creates disappointment? Those questions will not make the decision painless, but they will make it cleaner. And clean leadership matters. Not clean in the sense of easy. Clean in the sense of honest, proportionate, and aligned. Transition, now. Let's move to the final major shift because leadership is not complete when you can lead yourself well, create clarity, build trust, and make strong decisions. The final test is whether your leadership makes other people stronger. Segment 5. Great leaders multiply leadership. Some leaders are impressive. Everything runs through them. They are the smartest voice in the room, the fastest problem solver, the one with the best instincts, the one everyone depends on. And for a while, that can look like strength. But there is a deeper question. What happens when that leader is not in the room? If everything slows down, if confidence disappears, if decisions stall, if nobody knows how to move without them, then what you have is not a strong leadership culture. You have centralization. Great leaders do not just perform leadership, they reproduce it. They build people, they expand judgment. They create environments where others become more capable, more confident, and more responsible over time. This is one of the most generous things a leader can do, because leadership is not really proven by how necessary you are in every moment. It is proven by the quality of people that grow around you. Now, multiplying leadership does not happen automatically. It requires intentional choices. First, you have to stop using competence as the only thing you reward. If the only people who get attention are the ones who already know how to do everything well, you may get output, but you will not necessarily build depth. Leaders who multiply others know how to spot potential, not just polish. They notice curiosity, follow through, coachability, ownership, courage, integrity, the ability to learn from mistakes without collapsing. Those are leadership materials. Second, multiplying leaders coach in a way that develops judgment. They do not just give answers, they ask questions. What do you think is the real issue here? What options do you see? What trade-offs are you weighing? What would you recommend if I were unavailable? What support do you need from me? That kind of coaching communicates confidence. It tells people, I expect you to think, not just execute. Now, of course, this takes more time than just giving the answer. And yes, when you are busy, it is tempting to skip that step. But every time you always provide the answer, you train dependency. Every time you create space for thinking, you train judgment. That compounds over time. Third, great leaders normalize learning curves. They do not expect first attempts to look like 10th attempt. They create high standards without creating fear around imperfection. This matters because fear shuts down growth. If every mistake becomes an identity threat, people stop taking intelligent risks. They become cautious, political, overly polished, and under-creative. They optimize for safety instead of contribution. But if a leader says, I expect rigor and I also expect learning, people tend to stretch more honestly. That does not mean tolerating sloppy accountability. It means knowing the difference between a mistake inside sincere growth and a pattern of carelessness. Strong leaders can tell the difference. Fourth, multiplying leaders give away real responsibility, not pretend responsibility. This is important. Sometimes leaders say they are empowering people, but what they actually give away is labor, not ownership. They assign tasks, but keep control of all real decisions. They ask for initiative, but overturn every independent judgment call. They invite leadership, but only within invisible limits nobody understands. That is frustrating, and people feel it quickly. If you want people to grow, give them decisions sized to their current capacity, make expectations clear, and let them carry the weight of real ownership. Then debrief, coach, reflect, build from there. Finally, great leaders speak to identity carefully. They do not flatter people vaguely. They name what they see specifically. I trust your judgment in complex conversations. You handled that setback with maturity. You have a strong instinct for where people are getting stuck. You are ready for more scope. You ask the kinds of questions good leaders ask. Those statements matter because they help people see a larger version of themselves. Many people are carrying more capacity than they know. A good leader helps them recognize it, test it, and grow into it. And this may be the most beautiful part of leadership when, done well, it becomes inheritance. Someone carries your clarity into their future team. Someone repeats your calm in a hard moment. Someone adopts your fairness, your honesty, your courage, your belief in people. Someone becomes the kind of leader they once experienced through you. That is impact, not just results, not just revenue, not just execution. Formation. The best leaders leave behind stronger people. So let's bring it all together. Leadership begins with the self. If you cannot lead your own reactions, fears, and patterns, they will spill into your team. Leadership requires clarity. People can handle difficulty better than they can handle confusion. Leadership builds trust through consistency, not control, not image, not speeches, but repeated evidence of steadiness and integrity. Leadership demands hard decisions, and the best leaders make them with both courage and humanity. And leadership reaches its highest form when it multiplies, when your presence does not merely drive performance, but develops people. If you really think about it, leadership is not about being the center of everything. It is about becoming the kind of person who helps other people stand taller, think better, act braver, and work with more trust and purpose. That is a meaningful life. That is meaningful work. And frankly, that is the kind of leadership the world needs more of right now. Not louder leaders, not more performative leaders, not more leaders obsessed with personal brand and polished language. We need leaders with depth, leaders with steadiness, leaders with honesty, leaders who can carry pressure without spreading chaos, leaders who can tell the truth without crushing people. Leaders who can create both excellence and trust. That kind of leadership changes teams. It changes organizations. It changes families. It changes communities. And it always starts closer to home than we think. It starts with the person in the mirror. So here is your call to action for this week. Pick one leadership conversation you have been avoiding, one area where your team lacks clarity, or one pattern in yourself that tends to show up under pressure. Just one. Do not try to overhaul your entire leadership style in a single week. Choose one honest point of growth. Then ask yourself, what would stronger leadership look like here? What would clearer leadership sound like here? What would more grounded leadership do next? And then do that next thing. Have the conversation, clarify the priority, own the mistake, set the standard, delegate the responsibility, tell the truth, ask the better question, pause before reacting. Leadership grows in moments like that. If this episode helped you, share it with one person who is carrying responsibility right now, maybe a team lead, a founder, a manager, a coach, or someone stepping into leadership for the first time. And if you want to keep growing in this area, take a few minutes after this episode to write down the one leadership pattern you most want to strengthen over the next 30 days. That is where real change begins. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.